Hey everyone, in the video today I want to talk about preparing your digital files for print, and I want to share with you 3 key steps that are a part of my workflow to get my images ready for print. As always, I really appreciate your likes. Feel free to leave any questions below, and if you enjoy the video, please consider subscribing because I've got a lot more on the way. So one key thing to mention is that I like to outsource my printing. I use professional printing labs that get amazing results, and they can also print much larger than what you can do at home. And that just frees me up to do more of the stuff that I love instead of messing around with the actual printing side of things. So the video today is more the preparation of the file itself. It's probably also worth mentioning that there's probably a million ways that you can prepare the file for print. Some of them are probably quite extensive as well. My method here is something that I've been doing for years now. I'm going to show you the results as well towards the end of the video. I'm really happy with how this works. So hopefully you can try it as well. And if it works for you, that's awesome. But like I said, there's a million different ways to, get certain results. This is just what I do. I think it's simple and effective. So with that out of the way, step 1 is to open your edited file in Photoshop. So we're going to be using Photoshop today. This needs to be a file that's no longer a raw file. This is the edited version. So for me, typically I process the raw, and then once I finally commit to the edit, which can take some time because I like to do multiple visits over the shot, once I finally save that final image, it ends up being a PSD file, which is a Photoshop document. It's an uncompressed high resolution file. You can also do a TIFF file as well. You could even save from TIFF in, say, Lightroom, and then you could jump into Photoshop. So either a TIFF or a PSDs might be what you want to open up. So for today, this is a PSD file here. This is an older image of mine. I shot this in 2019. But at any day, someone could contact me, or I might get a print order through my website. So I have all these PSD files, my portfolio shots, in specific folders on hard drives. So it's very quick and easy for me to access. So I've opened up this PSD right now, and this is it here, full screen. The first step, guys, that I like to do is run my eyes over the image and look for any blemishes, particularly something like dust spots or lens flares, or just something that maybe you didn't notice on the initial run through on the edit. Because once this is printed, everything is really going to be quite visible. And the first few prints that I did, the second I viewed the print, I saw a dust spot immediately. It's amazing what you see in the physical print compared to on screen. So to do this, I'll duplicate the layer first of all, our main base layer here. I'm going to do Command J. That gives us just a duplicate copy. Now I'm going to hold down Command and push the plus icon to zoom in. And I'm going to zoom in around 100%. I don't really go too much tighter than that. And look at that, there's already some dust spots on the right here, which I spotted. So the whole process really is to zoom in and just move from left to right across the screen. Now, if you do have dust spots like I do, you can use the spot healing brush, or I like to use typically the clone stamp. And that gives me the ability to just choose which pixels I'm cloning across. The opacity, I'll leave that around 70% or so, and that way I'll do multiple clicks to gently patch over the area so it doesn't look too repetitious. So I'll just hold down Alt Sample by clicking, and then just click a couple of times in that area that I'm trying to patch up. The other thing is, if you right click the hardness, I like to leave the hardness on 0 so there's no signs of the brush being applied anywhere, no hard lines or anything. So you want to run along, check the image. Typically it's going to be in those larger areas like a sky, for example, where there's a lot of similar tone and color. Down here, say in the grass, if there was a dust spot, you pretty much wouldn't see it. But here we go. Here, for example, there are some little lens flares because I was shooting straight towards the sun. So this is something else that you might want to get rid of. So next to the letter P, those bracket buttons, now Alt, I'm going to sample there by clicking, and then I just do a couple of clicks because the opacity is low, so I have to click more than once. Alright, with that out of the way, step number 2 is to adjust the shadows and blacks. With our digital photographs, we're working on backlit monitors, and these backlit monitors are helping us see a lot of detail that won't actually be seen when we transfer this to a medium like paper or canvas. So step 2 for me is adjusting the shadows and blacks, even the exposure partially, raising everything up brighter. So by the time it's transferred to the paper, it will come down darker, but then it will go back to looking how that original file was meant to look. A simple way to do this in Photoshop is to go up to Filter and then Camera Raw Filter. This is just how I like to do it because I like to do a lot of work in ACR, Camera Raw. So it's going to pop up. Here's our file here. And you might be surprised, but you really need to bring these details up quite heavily to the point that the file starts to look quite nasty, almost embarrassing. It's a bit silly, the dynamic range, but once it's transferred to the paper, it looks fine again. So the workflow here, initially for this file, if you look at the histogram, you know, we've got a lot of tones. There's mid-tones, there's brighter tones, but the majority is back here in these darker tones, shadows, blacks. I want to just shift everything to the right of the histogram, just bring everything up. Now, of course, if I grab the exposure slider and do that, that would do everything, but it's doing the highlights too, and now they're really overexposed. So we can't really just do that. I do a little bit of everything. So for this shot, we might do a touch of exposure. This is where we started. So maybe we'll just bring that up 0.25. The highlights, you can see them clipped out on the right here. I'll now recover, and we might have to go down -25. So you can see the histogram, they're not blowing out. This is the key part, the shadows and the blacks. You might have to, every shot is going to be different, obviously. You might have to go up anywhere from, you know, depends on the image, 20, 30, 40. This shot here, we might go around 40. And then the blacks, I might just boost up, let's say about +20, something like that. The brightness value here now is too bright. I didn't edit the image like this for a reason. I don't like having all that foreground bright. It's not realistic and the eye doesn't lead effectively into the background. However, I know, and just from experience, that when this gets printed, it will go back to looking how the original did. So if I push P on the keyboard, we get before, push P again, after. You can see the whole point here. Let's raise it up. Look at the histogram. So a little bit dark, getting pushed to the right. Bring those tones up so when it's down on the paper, they're not so black and underexposed and just muddy. Alright, so what's the next step here? I just push OK to lock those settings in. So now that's going to apply our brightness and everything. Now it's time for step number 3, the resizing. To resize the image, we go up the top to image and then image size, and we're going to get a box here which shows us the current size of the file. In the printing world, I like to work in inches. Inches is quite common to use when it comes to printing. Today we're going to actually downsize this. So the default here is 26 inches wide. I just want to do 12 inches. So if I put in 12, it maintains the ratio, so it's changed the height for us automatically. So it's maintaining that 3:2 ratio which the image was shot at. The resolution I leave 300 ppi, I always leave that. So all I'm doing is changing the longest edge. Maybe you want to do a 16 by 24, put in 24, 20 by 30, just put in 30, just do the longest edge. Now we push OK. So it's about to lock that in. So in this case, it's going to downsize the file, which is always a good thing. If you're going down, that's great. Once you start to expand the file, depending on your camera and the resolution, you will only be able to go so big. Keep in mind though that any visual art should not be viewed from a few inches away. Typically the minimum viewing distance should be whatever the width is of that art piece. You should at least be standing that far away from it. So now that's been resized, the last thing I need to do is save this as its own separate file which I can email off to the printing lab, or maybe you can put it on a thumb drive and take it into the lab. And that's just a matter of file, save as. So file, save a copy, I'll do a copy, and I'm going to do it as a JPEG. If I'm printing 24 inches or below, I'll save as a JPEG. If it's going to be a larger print, going 30 inches plus type thing, then I'll typically do that as either a TIFF or a PSD. Depending on what lab you use, it might depend what file you save as, but those files are larger, less compressed, so you're going to have more detail there for that bigger print. So in this case, it's just a JPEG, so I'm going to throw it straight to the desktop, select JPEG, push save. It's going to ask me what quality do I want? I want 12, maximum quality. I push OK, and now that file has been sent off to the desktop, and that's ready to be emailed and sent off to the printing lab. So here we go. Here's an example of that file printed, and the details now, the darks, those darker tones, have gone back to looking more how it did on the original file. So they're not crazy bright and getting a very unrealistic look. You can see how it drops back and is much darker. A few things to consider is firstly, the calibration of your monitor and the colors. It's going to come down to what monitor you're on. There also will have to be the brightness value. How do you know how far to bring up those shadows and blacks? The best way to find out, guys, because it's going to vary depending on your setup and also the printing lab that you're using, but the best way to know is to do some test prints with a printing lab, analyze the results and keep in mind the adjustments you made, and then use that as a starting point to go from there. Hopefully it doesn't take too many adjustments. If you're using a good lab, then you should get some pretty good results straight off the bat. And if you're using a good quality monitor, whether it's a Mac or an Asus, BenQ, whatever it is, your results should be pretty close to being in that ballpark straight away. When it comes to paper, there's lots of different paper options too. I typically go for like a semi-gloss. One is called Centurion Photo Silk. There's luster paper, which you might have heard of. Fuji Pearl has a good range of papers too. And then there's different fine art papers that you can look into also. One thing to consider with paper, so this is obviously paper mounted on a mat board, which can just be framed or even just displayed as is. Paper's going to get reflection, particularly once it's behind glass. So I've got to say that one of my favorite mediums to print on is canvas. Now, canvas has come a long way. And I think the results in canvas look great. The canvas is light, we don't have to worry about glare or reflection, and the price point is a lot cheaper too. So this is a canvas print, and the details there, you can see that it still reflects the light, but it doesn't really get a glare or an actual reflection, like I said, which is what's going to happen once you put a print behind glass. And the results look great. Tack sharp. There is a texture to it, obviously. Once you get up close, you'll be able to see that and feel it. But again, the whole point of wall art is not to be staring at it from a few inches away. Wow. Something's going to fall over. But here is one that's 45 inches wide. Hopefully, you get an idea of the results there. And again, just tack sharp, nice and light. Don't have to worry about reflections. So that's stretched canvas on a timber frame. And of course, canvas can go in a floating frame as well if you wanted to get a frame around the outside. So let's summarize. Open up your edited file in Photoshop. You want to check for dust spots and just blemishes, lens flares, etc. Then consider raising up the shadows and black quite significantly to a point where you're really revealing those details and it's starting to look a little bit too bright on the monitor. And then we want to resize image and image size and then set your sizing from there. I really strongly recommend that you find a printing lab, preferably near you, and develop that relationship with them. It's going to make things a lot easier. So then from there, you might be able to just send your files off and have the confidence that it's going to come out with the right results every single time. And lastly, experiment with different papers, check out canvas, and find for you what you like, because then it's going to give you that confidence when someone inquires about getting something on the wall, you can steer them in the right direction. Again, if you have any questions, leave them below. I'll get back to you. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.